The Pokemon game series isn't exactly known for its good writing. Their narratives are perfectly serviceable, but if you ask someone their favorite things about the Pokemon games, nobody's going to mention the time they were required to give a sailor a back rub. That's not necessarily a bad thing, as the games do tend to do a great job servicing their intended fantasy of going on an adventure and catching a lot of cute creatures. You're not playing the game for the story, so that's okay. But that's also why it's such a welcome surprise when their stories are engaging. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team is a game where you play as a Pokemon and rescue other Pokemon in distress. Unlike the mainline Pokemon games, you're not saving them from any specific villains. You're saving them from natural disasters. The Pokemon world is suffering from fissures, forest fires, melting snow, and more. You're saving them from climate change. This is such an important piece of the game that I've seen nobody talk about. That's a little weird, isn't it? Pokemon is literally the largest media franchise in the world. But if I look up Pokemon Rescue Team Climate Change on Google, I get zero results. Well, I get zero relevant results because Google's search engine sucks now, but you know what I mean. This is a game made for children. Its theme is made in a way that is as straightforward as possible. But that's what makes it so weird that nobody has done this reading yet. I don't understand if people just aren't seeing this, or if they're afraid of making a slightly political analysis. The game's conflict is literally based on the results of a changing climate. It's literally a game about climate change. How is this not obvious? I can't possibly be the only one who's made this connection, right? Right? Okay, to be fair, there is no explicit mention of carbon emissions being the cause of natural disasters. We never really get a good explanation as to why this is all happening, and anytime another character gives a reason, it feels like wild speculation. So I'm not going to argue that the game is secretly depicting the effects of fossil fuels in the Pokemon universe like they do in the real world, but I do want to show how the game encourages you to make that connection. It's not going to be an especially deep or revolutionary analysis, because again, it's a game for children, but I do want to provide a reading that seems underappreciated. After creating your character, you're immediately assigned to save a small Pokemon who has become lost in the woods. This act of kindness inspires you and your partner to start a rescue team, an official group that works to help the Pokemon community, mostly in the form of, well, rescue. The first third or so of the game is dedicated to other various episodic rescue attempts, establishing yourself as a part of a small Pokemon village. You hold an important role for this community, because rescue teams are needed more and more as natural disasters have started to rise. The outcomes of these disasters have far-reaching effects, as Pokemon outside the village have become increasingly desperate and violent in response. This has caused the villagers to fear, or at least be suspicious of, outsiders. As Lombra says, it's a mean world out there. The game isn't just interested in climate change, but also the social response to climate change. This is where the game stands out from other environmentalist media for kids. While a love for nature is an ideal across the political spectrum, the response to its destruction is very much not. Of course, Pokemon Rescue Team is obviously not going to be explicitly partisan. Lombre isn't going to be canvassing for Reagan at any point of the game. But it does require engaging with ideas like xenophobia, how we treat outgroups, and your personal relation to it. Because while you are part of this Pokemon community, you are not a part of their in-group. You play as a human who, for reasons unknown, turned into a Pokemon. This serves two main functions: being a self-insert character as a sort of proto-isekai, but also to separate the main character from the characters who are Pokemon. Humans do not appear at any point in the game, but traces of humanity do. Humans only exist in the ways they impact nature, either in their interactions with Pokemon or their creations. There are two areas in the game that are explicitly made by humans: the power plant and the laboratory. These are, of course, physical places with a gameplay purpose, but also signifiers of modern ideas about science and progress. This space that was once used to bring humanity into a new age is now forever changed, forgotten, and devoid of any relationships to people. Now, I'm not going to argue that this is a sign that the game is secretly post-apocalyptic. This isn't an Ash is secretly in a coma theory, but it does evoke the idea of humanity in decay. These man-made structures are not permanent, and the environment has overtaken it. Humanity is a specter, literally haunting the game's narrative. And it eventually comes back to haunt you too. Try as you might to hide it, the village will always eventually discover that you were once a human. And when they do, when they find out that you are not one of them, They are receptive to the idea that getting rid of you will get rid of their problems, to somehow get rid of the natural disasters. And they're not satisfied with just exiling you. They're willing to go a step further. This isn't your traditional Pokemon villain. Mainline Pokemon games will often have two major players within the story: the villain team you fight against, and the relatively friendly rival who you can look up to. Pokemon Rescue Team 2 follows this template, with Team Meanie acting as the former and Team ACT acting as the latter. Team Meanie are the obvious bad guys, performing the usual duties of a rescue team along with some racketeering and outing your humanity to the rest of the village. Team ACT, on the other hand, are the perfect rescue team. They are kind, they are powerful, and they are willing to do anything for their community. But in this moment, when your humanity is revealed, they are both your enemies. Sure, you may have expected the corrupt rescue team to do something like this, but even when the system is working perfectly in the ways it's supposed to, the community will turn against you when you are no longer seen as a part of it. This conflict is eventually resolved, of course, with hugs and kisses all around. It would be, quite bold of the rioters if it wasn't. But even once you are accepted into the in-group again, it is clear what would happen if you are no longer a part of it. A protective, exclusionary response to climate change might be understandable, but it forces you to think about how it affects the people who are excluded. So the question is, what is the alternative that the game provides? Thus far, I haven't really talked about the actual game part of the game. You can pretty clearly separate the narrative and the gameplay if you want to, but this next step requires a combination of the two. The mystery dungeon games are dungeon crawlers, where you explore procedurally generated maps, fight enemies, and complete quests. In Pokemon Rescue Team, these areas are biomes that are each affected by the natural disasters in their own unique way. But you're not exactly fighting the natural disasters or helping the Pokemon that live there. Taken literally, diegetically, what rescue teams do is a form of imperialism. You're going into a foreign land to beat people up and take their stuff. It's kind of open and shut. But come on. Combat is a genre conceit. If you're picking up this game, you're probably going into it in order to have fun fighting and exploring, and you're probably willing to accept any excuse the game gives to let you do that. This doesn't mean that dungeon crawling is completely devoid of ideology. It is worth thinking about why we have the desire to fight and explore. But the point is, combat is not a gameplay element that stands out in any meaningful way. Interpreting the game on a diegetic level misses the forest for the pseudo-woodos. What does stand out is the recruitment mechanic. After defeating an enemy, they will have a chance to join your rescue team. Every time this happens, it's a memorable event, greatly increasing your team's power and expanding the possible space of play. This is really important because you're encouraged to look at the world through a lens where every enemy you face is a possible ally. You are doing a form of community building while acknowledging the value of anyone outside that community. This is completely opposite to the way you're treated as a fugitive, as an outside force viewed under suspicion that must be destroyed. Through the gameplay, you are creating an alternate solution away from the xenophobic status quo. And this is why Pokemon Rescue Team has stuck with me for so long. It's a basic message, but one that made a big impression on me when I was a kid. And as the Earth gets warmer and warmer, and as natural disasters continue to rise, it's easy to forget these simple lessons. Because even if you're a perfect model citizen, an exclusionary response to climate change will always come with the risk that one day, you might be the one who is excluded.